In this guide, we will show how you can utilize the API portal test capabilities to validate your API product. This guide is part of a series to help you get started with Akana. Following guides explain ways to further enhance your API product for better discoverability and usability, or clarify more advanced Akana capabilities. In this guide, we will use the product created for the Pet Store API as explained in a previous guide. Also, we assume that an active contract exists between an app and this API. If this is not yet the case, please review the relevant guide to create app and active contract. Among the functions offered by the Akana API portal is the one to test your API product. API consuming parties can use this testing capability to ensure that the API is performing as expected. But this testing capability can also be used by you as the API creator. Once an iteration of an API product is deemed ready, you can verify whether all is working as expected, both from a functional and from a security perspective. To start, log into your Akana API portal by providing your username and password. Test Client can be used from both an app and an API perspective. In this video, we will show how to use it from the app perspective. First, we will select the app that we intend to test from. In the top-level navigation bar, select Apps. Click All Apps, or My Apps, to open the list of available apps. In this guide, we will first test the API from the app called Test Sandbox Client that was created in the previous video. Click Test Client from the menu in the left navigation panel. Most fields in Test Client will automatically be populated with values derived from the API interface and the applicable contract, for example, the name of the API that's going to be accessed and the endpoint for which access has been granted. Values can be adjusted where required. For example, you can select the operation you'd like to invoke from the operation list. Let's first try the Get Store Inventory operation. Select that operation from the operation drop-down box. Test Client will not allow for immediate invoke of an API for which access has been secured. For such a case, the request must contain a token that represents an authorized client. Test Client will generate the token for you based on the access control policy with which the API has been configured. First, confirm the identity of your client by clicking Setup. You can confirm the app credentials that are presented, or, if you have multiple apps with an active contract for this API, select an alternative one. Click Save to confirm your selected app. Next, you can provide some input for the token that will be generated. This input depends on the access control policy that the API has been configured with. Click Security. This API has been configured with an OAuth security policy. Hence, the security pop-up will show the options as they apply to this particular OAuth server configuration. For example, the grant type drop-down box will show a list of the applicable OAuth grant types. Select the client credentials grant type from the list. Click Get Token to generate the OAuth access token. The access token and some other details will be presented in the token field. Click Next. By default, an API product will not have been configured for cross-origin resource sharing. For now, we can ignore this setting. Click Finish to complete security setup. The Invoke button should now be enabled. Click Invoke to submit your request. Assuming the target endpoint is available, the request should be successful and result in an HTTP 200 status and a JSON response. You can adjust the response format by clicking Formatted. Not presenting a valid OAuth access token or presenting a token for a client for which no active contract exists will result in a fault response. You can review some essential request processing steps by clicking Trace. For example, Trace will show you the client identity on whose behalf the API request was made. Also, it shows that the OAuth access token was automatically added to the request authorization header. In Test Client, you can also review the request and response headers after a request has been processed. Click Headers with Request or Response to review. More operational data are available, which we will look at in another guide. In this guide, we have shown you how you can use the API portal's Test Client to start testing and validating your secured API. We have demonstrated how Test Client will help you by satisfying policy requirements. For example, generate the access token required by the access control policy that the API has been configured with.